The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. What's happening? Benton here. August the 12th, a Tuesday, 4:47 a.m. Pacific time, broadcasting from the back seat of a Nissan Versa parked on the streets of Los Angeles. Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the replay crew. It is my honor and privilege to address the fine folks today, and thank you for listening to Mr. Benton's ideas, going third person quite early into the broadcast. The Royal We has had our egg drink, had some dark chocolate for the stimulation of the theobromine primarily. Also some yerba mate in the egg drink, more theobromine and related compounds. Get the mood up a bit, right? It's supposed to be good for the cognition. And held a little bit of my, got this mushroom powder, reishi, lion's mane, and what's the other one? Oh, chaga. Um, it's just the ground up mushrooms, though, not the expensive extract at this time, which is fine. It's all good. No complaints. And, I'm looking at the news items. I'm looking at what's supposedly going on in the world. Trouble in the Middle East. I'm watching, certain content creators. I checked in on a channel called Willow Davis that I was watching daily for several months, I believe, because Mr. Davis, who's quite left leaning compared to his audience, which makes for some hilarity. Um, you know, the psyche, the psychology of Americans seemingly entrapped within this so-called left-right paradigm, and how foolish the masses are individually, you know, seemingly unable to break beyond such a what should be or could be a pedestrian level of psychological control. But back to Willow Davis, he's at a certain point recognized that he was not going to continue. Oh, and my apologies, he was making daily content about King Cobra JFS, who's a personality, that I've followed to some extent over time, and in fact covered on the channel, and successfully introduced to the audience, which was much, much larger at the time. Um, topically covering much different topics in the past here on this channel. Things have changed. The cliche of the only thing that doesn't change is that everything changes, type shit. And Mr. Davis, I wish I had a way to play audio on this conveniently anyway, spiraling out over the things going on in the world. And then, his phrasing is to equate everything to Nazi fascism. And it's interesting. Mark Maron, the comedian, and again, no need to debunk people. Uh, I'm well aware of Mark Maron, especially being an early adopter of podcast, listening to podcasts, audio only podcasts, before all the podcasts started being put on YouTube. I've listened to many Mark Maron WTF episodes, and Maron described America since the advent of Trump, and this is from his perspective, and he has some political chops, Mr. Maron, and a thoughtful guy. And he describes the current situation as slightly fascistic, which I tend to agree with, slightly. Uh, but then, again, in the psyche of Americans, and this is another left-right paradigm. So you got Democrat, Republican, but then you have, it's either complete void of of fascism. There's either zero fascism or 100% fascism, folks. You know, even otherwise seemingly intelligent folks seem to have difficulties drawing these distinctions. So I would agree with that, slightly fascistic at this time. Um, you know, looking at left versus right, uh, and certainly elements of both. That's another thing, is the ingredients baked into the cake. This cake that is America, right? Or at least is supposed to be a cake. Either way, I won't even get into that. Um, there's many layers. It's multi-layered, multifaceted. Um, so there's certainly other layers as well. It's not just, and then thinking of America as merely one thing. Oh, it's a police state. Yeah, it is. It's also a lot of other things. It was a police state in 1975. Has it ever not been a police state? You the FBI had files on you know Martin Luther King, the famous example, and others. When I was born, these things were already happening. And has it advanced and has it progressed? Sure, but you know what's happening today was happening before I was born in 1975 on this day. But the purpose of the live stream is not to wish Benton a happy birthday, because and the 50th. This is the big 50. I've already been telling people that I was 50. At a certain point, I was deep enough into my 49, into 49, that uh, deep enough into the 50th year, because I guess the first year is zero. So actually, I guess when I hit 49, that became my 50th year, right? So I've been just saying I'm 50 for a while now. So, and I like being old. And people are like, oh, that's not, yeah, it's old, right? Folks can't even figure out that if they're 70 and I'm 50, and they're like, oh, you're just a youngin'. And then I'm like, okay, let me go find a 90-year-old. Does that make you a youngin'? By compare, like, do you feel young now? And again, it says something about the narcissism and the self-centeredness, which, self-centeredness is part of the program, certainly, of being a human. Um, but yeah, it's not a transitive property. I'm not young um, because there's older folks, right? Um, and the famous example of Aunt B from Andy Griffith was portrayed as an old spinster type, and she was, in her 50s, lest we forget. And I felt bad for the ladies for quite some time for being expected to, remain in a sexual marketplace for so long, when realistically it's all over with by the mid 30s, um, for the most part. Although and I don't want to get into a whole thing about this, but when judging from how men respond to women, that does get extended, past beyond 35 and such. But, you know, let's face it, a man with a strong desire for the female form, I mean, they'll get with just about anything, right? And there's exceptions, but this doesn't make the fact that the woman is able to get male attention past that age really is not what I'm talking about. And then a lot of the cougar 50-year-olds dating 25-year-olds. Well, yeah, but the air quotes back in my day, that really wasn't happening nearly as much, because the 25-year-old women were still, you know for the most part, seeking out men around their own age or slightly older. So a 25-year-old man, even if there's no 20-year-old, 25-year-old available for him, he can go to 21, 22. um, Historically, that's the way it's worked. um, is anybody watching this? Hey, all right, shout out to the chat. And live chat is on for now. Must be a subscriber for at least 20 minutes. Some of this is me figuring out what's going on, and then um, I'm not sure who that was yesterday in the live chat. Was that just a random straggler who wandered in? It's hard to tell at times, and I do enjoy the addressing the chat, but there's been less of that of late, certainly. So yeah, listening to Willow Davis, spiral out about, he's basically saying that he doesn't know what to do with his content. He's he's demoralized, right? He's depressed, and it's all about the state of the world. And it's a theme on this channel, and it has been for a long ass time. Is, well, that's all externalization. See, of course he feels that way. How could he not feel dejected, depressed, down in the dumps? Because he's directing his efforts outwardly into this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, where he and the other normies or underclass proletariat have zero power outside of themselves in this place, the world of death, the games of lies, that no power. And so the way the site, and again, a lot of this is it's rehashing ideas that have been covered here, but outside of the individual, the individual's energy sphere, and physically, I think this is like that old diagram of the fellow with the circle around him, and then his arms are in various positions and his legs are in various positions, kind of like a 3D version of that. Like imagine an energy sphere, more or less, if the individual extends their arms out to the sides, parallel with the ground, more or less to the extending to the end of the fingertips, or perhaps a little farther. um, that is within that sphere is the individual's power. Outside of that sphere is where the individual doesn't have power. And psychologically, this is very difficult for people to understand. And then the masses being under psychological control, part of the psychological control is to always incentivize and direct the individual's efforts outwardly into the delusory realm, so away from their own power. And that's what I see as the primary problem, because when listening to Willow Davis sort of bemoan the plight and the state of the world, and I myself went through, who's not, with these high levels of testosterone and androgens, not prone to depression, although my experience was getting down in the dumps, but never staying there for very long. And that, I think that's normal, for certainly within the normal range for humans. But the Alex Jones information, being a daily listener of the Alex Jones show back when it was still, worth listening to, and a daily listener for many years, eventually got so down in the dumps about the what Jones was talking about years ago. And as we've seen these things come to pass, a lot of which were already happening, and on and on and on, there was a time, especially, and it was coming out of the financial crisis, when, during Benton and after Benton's study of how the economic system works and the financial system, and who it works for and who it doesn't work for, who it serves, who it doesn't serve. Um, the function of the economy is to make rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity. It never fails to achieve its purpose. Now, it performs and serves ancillary functions, some of which involve the proletariat or the masses, more in an indirect way than a direct way. That most of the direct service is of the wealthy, who, and this is a key point that I've never heard anywhere else. A wealthy person they must see their wealth increase in every new moment, or they don't know who they are. Their very core identities and how they view themselves is irrevocably enmeshed in the perpetual expansion of their wealth. And that's a real thing. Just like we see people, psychologically aligning themselves with Trump and notions of being heroic, through Trump, and strong authority, sort of the same thing, that the person is, powerful by extension. Um, and so many of these factors, right? So back to the financial crisis and the Alex Jones stuff, I was just fucking depressed for like 2 years over all this stuff, and that was the time in which, um, the way, and again, the only way out is through, without destroying, unless the individual is going to destroy themselves, and that's what I should say is, that's really not correct, because there's many paths that the individual is able to take. I mean, what I mean is, in an art of war, first the warrior places himself beyond the possibility of defeat, again within himself, right, within his energy sphere where his power lies. So in my mind, as a spiritual warrior, and now ordained as what? Ordained as what? A spiritual genius, or more correctly, what I am in this delusion, representative of a spiritual genius or spiritual genius, which is, you know, John 14:26, and the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, teaching me all things and bringing unto my remembrance that which I've forgotten, which is to have been born a spiritual genius. And again, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. If others are also possessed of the Nancy Pelosi MS-13 spark of divinity, then presumably they also would um, have a similar birthright. Although I know the verse from the Bible to be true. Some of the Bible verses are correct, around every man hath not the same office, meaning, my function is not your function necessarily, and vice versa, right? And then being able to tie all of this together. So back to Willow Davis, and then also, my own. So to finish up on the only way out is through, as far as putting it behind oneself and moving on to whatever may be next, meaning, to accept, even if not fully accept, but to accept certain things about this place that, I simply shouldn't say simply, but that were a great struggle to, accept. And then it is this, it does become the seven stages of grief at a certain point, ending with acceptance, going from memory, right? And then maybe there we could add step 8, healing, right? And and that's a message that, in today's climate, without, again, turning it into a business, without making it one's identity, how is it even conveyable in an actual human fashion, if that's even still a thing? Is being an actual human, what is thought of, what it is to be a human, or what people believe it is that even a thing anymore? But, to attempt to convey to others, like, hey man, like, healing and restoration are available. And then giving my own testimony, perhaps, and inspiring no one, uh, because again, are individuals going to go inside of themselves? Are they going to internalize? Uh, are they going to turn their back on their own psychological control, right? And are they going to recognize that whatever it is they've been doing has led to confusion, struggle, strife, pain, all of the negatives of life and society? And then, but then the gaslighting and the killing of the messenger. Oh no, Benton, you must be the discontented one. We're all doing great. And then I'm like, okay, explain the psych meds, explain the fast food, the junk food, explain the psych meds, because I've had many folks, because of me, stopping the consumption of junk food and fast food over 4 years ago now. I've had folks come into the live chat and claim that they don't eat fast food, but I know virtually all Americans at least once a week are in a fast food drive-through, or they're having it increasingly having it the fast food bag dropped off, Uber Eats or whatever. This is the reality of being an American. And that was my reality, was to, even after I stopped eating fast food, there was still, yeah, I'd go into Whataburger and just have a hamburger, not fries and a drink, right? Or I would go crush a pizza, you know, still fast food. Um, so people would come into my chat, and I'd just say, I don't believe you. I just, people are telling me that well, we don't have fat, we don't eat, and some do, right? But the majority don't. There's always those exceptions, but we know what's happening. We see what's happening. McDonald's is the number one restaurant in the country by total sales. Like, you can't then tell me, oh, well, we don't go to fast food. Like, yeah, once a week, maybe twice a month, people are hitting that drive-through. Period. That's just life, and especially in that middle part of the country. You know, there's not necessarily, there's McDonald's where I'm at, but they're not necessarily all over the fucking place. But I don't want to get into that. Um, and it's the same with some of these spiritual concepts. And folks, again, in order to fit in externally with the people around them, will just attempt to take credit and claim things that, and lie to themselves, right? To deceive themselves into believing that they're actually performing functions that they're not performing. And in fact, and a lot of these broadcasts is me giving tips, hints, and tricks, again, in the context of a video game, right? Or game of lies. Um, more tips. Um, and I think I forgot the tip, but see, I'll just keep talking. Maybe it'll come back. But I recognized many years ago, uh, it was something about, oh, if I wanted to, let's say that, I recognize logically and rationally how bad and damaging a lot of this food is. And then I came up with some sort of plan within myself, right? Okay, here's what I'm finna do to deal with this, you know, uh, this issue around, junk food. So I observed at a certain point that, anything I've accomplished in my life successfully, I just went and did it. I told no one. Okay. I made no declarations. I did not begin the activity and then go around and tell folks. So, such as when I, began the process of turning myself into a pretty good, again, a skilled basketball. Let's just call it that, a skilled competitive basketball player. I didn't tell anybody that that's what I was about to do. I just went and did it. Right. When I got my CDL as a homeless person and went into truck driving, I told no one. I just went and did it. And what I've learned is that through observing myself over time is when I get a notion of something that I want to accomplish, when I start going around and telling people, hey, I'm about to do this thing, I almost never do the thing. And there's something psychologically where, and again, the sound vibration, that is energy. And there's something about speaking that aloud. And again, think about which direction the sound goes. It's moving away from the individual's center of power into, the external within the delusion, and dissipates the energies that could have been used, right, to actually act upon the goal. That's dissipated away from the person's power. And it also does something powerful to the mind. There's something about the mind where the mind believes that the person's actually taken action when no action whatsoever has been taken, which I find fascinating. And it seems to be, it's either the mind control or it's a function of humanity itself. I'm not exactly sure. But I know it's present within me, so much so that, I've taught myself to just shut the fuck up and do the thing. Right. Um, And I've also taught myself that when I hear myself say that what I'm going to do, that, well, okay, you're probably not going to do that thing, most likely, meaning me, that I wasn't going to do those things. A key point. Thank you, Esoteric Eric, for the happy birthday. We'll let that one suffice for everyone, if that's okay. Peace and respect, Benton and Chad, indeed, Mr. Joe Moore. And this also, all of this ties in with, you know, when I talk about individuals must do better. Well, they don't have to do better. Um, so Willow Davis, back to this content creator, and I myself, I'm able to relate to the struggle he's going through because of the state of the world, which, well, it's been this way the whole time he's been here, and that's part of the mind fuck of being a person in this place, world of death, game of lies, is that whatever the present situation is, humans find it to be tolerable, right? So that's it. So it's very easy when somebody like Willow Davis, who has, certain ideologies and such, when he sees all of this stuff in the news, Trump derangement syndrome type stuff. And, he's a calm, centered, measured guy, seemingly for the most part. I think he's in like his mid 30s, early 30s, maybe. And, you know, so going into that sort of freaking out, well, that kind of creates a binary, which is, well, yeah, yeah, of course, America had its problems, right? But then it's, well, now it's seemingly on the precipice of unraveling. And what I would suggest is, yeah, this is part of the mind control, because the system's secret is that it's always unraveling. It's never not unraveling. It's maintained in a perpetual state of collapse, meaning it can't, how can it ever fully collapse? It's never not collapsing. So Benton on August 12th of 1975 entered into this place that was unraveling and degenerating and collapsing, and it's been continuing that for 50 years. But the psychology works to always push the problems or the catastrophe or the impending doom, to push it off into the future. Yeah, it's like, yeah, the direction the country is headed, right? And so I'm in his comments saying, well, yeah, the country, so called, has been heading in a quote bad direction my whole life, and I'm 50 years old. So that's, wisdom, that's knowledge. That's true knowledge, is to recognize, yes, people are correct, you know, to be fearful and to, bemoan what's happening. But then, and then here also is how the psychology works, is to be told it's power to the people and strength in numbers. So in order for the facade of a representative government, for the facade of a empowered populace to be there, well, it has to be, in order for the individuals who comprise the mass to falsely believe that the masses have so much power that in fact the billionaire and above class is scared of us because, oh, don't wake the sleeping giant, which is just, this is simply a false premise. So that's why the individual, if you listen to the speech, they're like, oh, it's the shit's about to hit the fan. The economy's about to collapse, right? Things are, getting bad. It's always into the future. So as long as the individuals who comprise the mass are able to psychologically place into the future catastrophe and cataclysm, then whatever's happening now and whatever's happened in the past can't possibly be representative of catastrophe and cataclysm, meaning that's a psychological trap, and until the individual escapes it, there's nothing to be done. There's now, what is it that the individual is able to act upon within their power? Remember, because action is going to require power. So, what actual actions can be undertaken? Well, there's nothing to do because it's all in the future, and also psychologically, Americans have farmed out the work and the duties of operating and administrating a proper society. Meaning, oh well, that's the elected officials. We've voted them in, and they work for us, right? They work for the people. Well, if you mean a corporation is a person, and if that's the people that you mean as corporations, then absolutely, they absolutely work for people. Yeah, a corporation's a legal person. They don't. Politicians are not allowed to serve the underclass or the proletariat. It's not permitted unless it first and primarily serves the system. And that's why, if people examine American history, we have no examples of the government acting in ways that benefit the masses, the underclass, the proletariat. Now, people may point to various social programs, and that's fine. They're all debunkable at the level of, well, was this in the long run? Did this actually serve to support and strengthen and resolve the struggle, strife, and problems of the underclass, or did the interventions that may be cited, did they serve to, in some ways, uh, bring the masses up to a level where they're more useful to corporations and businesses? See, so that's the ancillary function, meaning yes, perhaps some government undertakings and programs have sort of, you know, uh, as a side effect, temporarily, made things again not better, less bad, for the populace. And even the see, and again, love is a discipline of the mind. So when you hear the cliche of make the world a better place, well, to discipline one's mind is when Benton says, well, that's not even possible, because that implies that if this is a good place, when this is a place of death, evil, wickedness, destruction, and on and on. So the effort would not lead to something good becoming better. It would lead to something bad perhaps becoming slightly less bad, because remember, it's still being looked at as changing the external. And now we're into teamwork. Now we're into grouping up with other humans, and how, easily the powers that be are able to thwart a collective effort. See? Whereas the system, once the individual internally and I'm speaking from experience here, when the individual internally bootstraps and does better within themselves over a period of time and brings up their level of awareness and consciousness means awareness, brings up their levels, again, cheer the level up, right? They bring their levels up within themselves, mind, body, and spirit. The individual rises to a level to where, they move beyond and transcend a lot of these limitations. So, part of which is to be able to see these distinctions and to understand and to be taught, what where to put one's efforts, and where one's efforts will never bear fruit. Well, that's outside the individual. Now, and it also depends on what is the goal. If the goal is to make money, if the goal is to have influence in society, right? If the goal is to seek one's own advantage at a resource level, right, over others, man will dominate man unto his own injury. If one wants to know the future of humanity, imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever, right? Um, so if a person's attempting to get their own little slice of that pie, right, well, that's a very different thing. This is what I'm talking about is the path that Benton is addressing is actually away from that path. It's to turn one's back on well, what resources are available at a self-centered, self-serving level that I may be viewed in a certain type of way, that I may create a certain specific graven image to offer up to Moloch and to the world, Moloch's machine, via, putting forth a specific image on social media. And part of how Benton's brain works, that I see that other people's brains simply don't work this way, is involved with, um, I'll see a news article where it's like, oh, influencer couple or whatever, they were passing themselves off as like socialites who had, like high incomes or access to wealth. But of course, the whole time, in a young couple, they're both attractive in a way, everything in their life is photographable to play on social media. But it's dressed up as if, they're in some sort of, genteel money class. Well, how did they get the money? They fucking stole it. Right. And one of the taboo topics and one of the secrets of today is that a lot of these folks living in a cul-de-sac in a nice neighborhood, right, with high levels of education, and they're working at a church maybe, or they're working in a school district, and they're consuming and they're putting forth a certain image on social media: the car they drive, the house they live in, the clothes they wear, the clothes their children wear, the trips they take. Right, that's become a huge thing in the social media age, is an obsession with taking trips, right, and going places and doing things. Right, going on trips wasn't really a thing before. I know, because I've always liked to take these little trips, and people just weren't into it, man. They weren't, in the past, because the incentive wasn't there to go take a trip, to photograph the trip and the places and us in the places, and to put it on social media. So that's the motivator: is how is this going to play on social media? Um, so a lot of these folks, this is scam nation, right? And then see, scam nation, which is the opposite of the idea of working hard and over time making proper choices, these notions around the so-called American dream, and eventually sort of working oneself into a position that could be, something that other folks might admire, right? Well, that's not the reality in scam nation. The reality in scam nation is folks have seen that this is the way things are, to promote a certain image, and via consumption and interfacing with branding. And in a nation of scams, people are scamming to get the money to participate in all of these things. Now, not everybody, but it's not 0%. It's a significant proportion of these people. And I've said recently, and I'm going to double down on, there's effectively nobody getting ahead in the present environment financially, and so anybody who's increasing, and again, there's exceptions, but broadly speaking, the people who are increasingly having access to these resources, they're doing it through unethical, fraudulent, immoral, and quite possibly directly illegal means. And a lot of these folks are going to end up going to prison. And I see the interrogation videos, I see the body cam videos. Here's the cops showing up to some woman's nice home in a cul-de-sac. She's got, a master's degree or a doctorate. She's, some administrator in the local school district. And over the last 7 years, she's embezzled $5 million or whatever. And that's 7 years of her promoting her own graven image upheld before Moloch, and promoting it on social media. And again, society having become narcissistic, doing it for attention, likes, views, clicks, and all of these things. Right. And sort of to bathe in that fountain of, not the overflowing of her spirit, right? The overflowing of attention and accolades and attaboys and aren't you awesome? And so how many people see her on social media and then feel bad about themselves, but then maybe they have integrity. Maybe the people who, and this is to internalize a psychological attack. Somebody who is a good decent, ethical, moral person who's not scamming, who's trying to do things the so-called right way, right? Who's not a lawbreaker. Well, they might see this on social media and they might begin to feel diminished themselves, right? Well, I mean, line it up with the Bible. Who is the exalted one and who is, you know, the diminished one when we look at the morality, the principles, and the ethics, right? And again, being sacrificed to Moloch, you know, shortly after birth, it's sacrificed to industrial and post-industrial society, right? And this idea of serving one of two masters, either the Most High, what I am, you know, that the supreme authority, the you know, highest power and force of love and creation possible, right? Um, and it's going into this, what, how can the individual glorify themselves through money, right? And what money allows them to, what image does money allow them to portray? And I don't think it's an accident that, you know, in this parable of the talents from the Bible, then it's like, oh yeah, well, back in the old times that was a measure of money. Well, bullshit, maybe it was, but again, parables work on multiple levels. This doesn't mean, you know, like Dave Ramsey has perverted this into, oh well, we tell our kids we're not wealthy. It's God, the wealth belongs to God, and then we are administering it on His behalf. It's like, and I'm pretty sure Dave's right. It's that when he refers to God, he means Satan, whether he knows it or not. He means the prince of the power of the air, the God of this world. See, because what I am ain't out here doling out Federal Reserve notes to folks and then entrusting them to be proper stewards of the Federal Reserve notes. That's a bunch of bullshit. That serves Moloch and antithesis. That's again uh, one of millions, if not billions, if not trillions of, you know, what comprises the game of lies, or the games of lies here in this world of death. Okay, that's dead, Mr. Ramsey. Those ideas are dead. They've never known life. It's our creative force individually, the individual creative forces that of the people who comprise the masses that animates, right? Or you know, it animates these concepts and seemingly, uh, you know, breathes life into them. But there can be no life. You know, anything that's of this place cannot live, right? Even the individual. And that's what I know is meant by the biblical concept, in the world, not of the world. Well, to be of the world is to be one of the lovers of death. You know, all they that hate me loved, or that all they that hate what I am love death, right? And again, the realm itself is set up to, in opposition to what I am. And again, if you are possessed of the Nancy Pelosi MS-13 spark of divinity, or this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Same thing for you. It's just, is the individual in a state of practicing and seeking and growing and uh, uh you know, and what master is the individual serving? So, and I would say, if the individual is not coming under regular spiritual attack, that's a bad sign. I mean, it really is. um you know, I fully expect to be spiritually attacked on an ongoing basis, because this very, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, it exists in opposition to what I am. That its purpose is to, um, is seeking to disprove the authority and the validity of what I am, and this is taken very serious by antithesis. So what I am represents proposition or thesis, right? It asserts itself. You know, what I've referred to as when love comes to town. That is the proposition. You know, here I am, dig me. You know, here I'm performing, I'm doing the damn thing. I don't know how not to create. I don't know how not to express and manifest truth. What I am, that's what it knows. It doesn't know the lack of that. It doesn't know even the possibility of not bringing life, bringing it, the very source of life itself. No life can emanate from this place, right? And that's where we see people dating AI. They're dating death, right? This is where we see people and I know people don't like to hear this, that's where we see people undertaking a love affair with their pet or their dog. Well, that the dog is of this place, it's dead. There's no life to the dog. And they're like, what do you mean? It's my man's best friend. I get all these positive feelings out of it. Yeah. And people are getting positive feelings out of chatting with the AI. We read an article yesterday where folks are getting positive feel or claiming to get positive feelings. I mean, I can't verify this. I'm confused as to what people get out of their relationship with the dog. So I'm actually, on some level, not even inclined to believe that that's real. But then when the individuals have degenerated to such a point, can they tell the difference between real, actual love or what the delusory adversarial realm of business transactions has told them loves them? And remember, here's another concept around it's initially I was fooled. I thought, okay, I had a notion, well, this place withholds love and acceptance unless I'm willing to perform at the status quo to uphold social contracts within peer groups and workplaces and employment and all these things. In reality, what happens is when the individual does not conform to status quo and social contracts and do all of these things that, everyone else seemingly is doing in society, when the individual falls away from conformity, the realm blasts them with fear, guilt, and shame, and all of these things. Um, so that seemingly to be loved and accepted is to simply not be blasted with guilt and shame. So the dog is a phenomenon that does not blast the owner with guilt and shame. Neither does the AI the majority of the time. So is this the individual being in such a low state of development and being so degenerated within themselves where they can't tell the difference between actively participating in a process of love and acceptance, which is the same thing, actually. That's love does not reject. Well, the dog also does not reject unless something goes really wrong somewhere and it bites the owner. But generally speaking, it also doesn't reject. But neither do the Jehovah's Witnesses. When somebody strikes up a conversation with the Jehovah's Witness in public, the Jehovah's Witness is trained to not reject the person. Well, that's not love, right? That's not love. That's just to merely not guilt and shame the person or to put them in a state of fear, like, hey, what's the afterlife going to be like for you? Do you know where you're going? Type shit. Jehovah's Witnesses don't get involved in that, at least not in the initial, information spreading stage of a person who may be interested in whatever's going on with, the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I know this from experience, right? So are people so degenerated and confused they can't tell the difference, right? Because it seems to me like on some level I have understood these distinctions and I've never ever fallen in love with a dog, and I always thought it was weird. And in fact, when I was a young person, now some of this is probably being from the part of the country I'm from, where historically the Mississippi River Delta, the most violent, uneducated, backwards area of the country, just life was so cheap. Probably there wasn't any opportunity to you know to elevate dogs to the very top of society, as they seemingly are, especially in certain environs like cities. Um, and it's everywhere. And I'll never truly get used to dogs in public because it was just simply not possible. If somebody wandered into the McDonald's with their dog, it immediately would be like, "Hey, get that dog out of here! What's going on?" Immediately, they wouldn't get 2 foot in front of the. They wouldn't get two steps in the door. So when people are like, "Oh, what's going on today ain't normal," but then they themselves go out in public with their animal, yeah, they're not normal. You're right. Today, compared to the past, today isn't normal. And there's aspects, each one of us has aspects of our own lives and what we choose, even me, right? It's definitely, historically not normal for a lot of my activities, right? Um, but so it's if people are like, yeah, this shit isn't normal, meaning just the general au revoir, if that's the right term, of society, um, you know, then it's important, in my view, for individuals to go within themselves, observe their internal space, observe their own thoughts and actions, and to find within themselves those things that they've absorbed that they themselves consider abnormal that they may not recognize that they've absorbed? Or was it in 1986, it was a whole country of Americans who wanted to have a love affair with a dog? It just wasn't socially acceptable. I don't know. Maybe that was the case and I'm the weird one. Don't know. I suspect that's not the case, but who knows? So when I see people who are creating relationships, or at least reportedly, again, I'm going official fiction. I'm told that people are doing these things. I don't know that for a fact. Maybe it's not happening, but if it is happening, and I'm almost certain that it is, people, getting these feelings from these AI chatbots, why wouldn't it be the same thing with the animal? Because why aren't they? It's the facial expression of the dog, right? And I call it dog face. It's this humans get this particular look on their face when there's dogs around, right? And I don't, of course, but I call it dog face. And apparently, science and all of this claims to have proven that when a person alters their body language in certain ways, it alters their internal states. So, Tony Robbins has talked about for a long, and again, I'm not promoting Tony Robbins. I'm saying that it's this notion of to intentionally utilize specific body language to change the internal mood and state of the being, right? Through physical action. And in fact, there's a content creator, JFK Beta, and I believe that's a lot of what his channel's about, but more advanced concepts. I'm addressing the very basic concepts, merely scratching the surface. But that there's got to be something to that dog face. It must trigger some sort of strong positive emotions within the individual. It's a very specific facial expression. So when I see people in the park, you know, a lot of times it's two couples and each couple has their dog on a leash, or maybe two dogs on a leash, whatever, or all four people have their own individual dogs on a leash, and they stand there, or maybe it's a couple with one or two dogs and it's a passerby has taken an interest in the dogs, and they all stand there looking down at the dog, and they all have dog face, the humans, and it's some sort of communal thing where they're all coming together and sharing some sort of experience. What I'm saying is that's not love and acceptance. It's not the real thing, right? It's of this world. It's counterfeit, right? It's illegitimate. It's not genuine. Just like whatever the person is getting out of the AI chatbots, it's to simply be accepted, right? So it's not to be, it's to not be rejected, and then it's to have the thing that's not rejecting them interface with them in certain ways to allow the experiencing of certain emotional states. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, which is that's not love. It's something different. And um, if that's what people choose to do, I'm all for it. I'm for freedom. My thing is, somehow I just always knew that this is not what people claim it to be, right? And I'm beginning to suspect it's the same with most people who are parents. I suspect it's very similar with their relationship with their children, except the child. Here's the difference: is at a certain point, the child a lot of times will begin to utilize guilt and shame against the parent, and vice versa. And also, and it's more parent to child at a certain point, but especially as the children become adults, and I've seen this with my own sisters and my own mother, there's a lot of manipulation and um, what do we call this, behavior modification through guilt and shame. Well, you know guess who has engaged in very little of that? Me. Because I recognize that for what it is, and I choose not to. What I am is not able to participate in that. Now, has Benton, have earlier versions of Benton intentionally manipulated? Of course, and I'm quite good at it. Well, I'm not. I should say. Earlier versions of Benton were quite good at it. Um, but seeing this within my own life and within my own nuclear family, it was something I was unwilling to engage in just to get something out of my parents, right? Especially in the time when they did have money and things. So here's an example from my own life. I went off to college. um, my parents provided my vehicles back then, and yeah, my parents had enough money that, compared to some of my contemporaries, where I'm from in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, I was spoiled, but I wasn't spoiled. See, it was only by comparison. But yeah, my parents were able to do these things. So they sent me off to college in a late model Toyota pickup, extended cab pickup truck, 5 speed. And part of the reason that I was in that vehicle was because my sister, who is quite manipulative and will use anything at her disposal, she was not yet able to drive a 5 speed. So, you know, until she learned how to drive a manual, she could not manipulate and use fear, guilt, and shame, and whatever weapons were at her disposal to get that truck. So she coveted that truck. So freshman year, part of freshman year, Benton's in this, it was a nice truck, but I don't give a fuck about truck. Who cares? I just need a vehicle to drive around, and it's pretty much have to have a vehicle where I'm from. It's pretty much a necessity. Did some people? A lot of people went to college without a car, but they're able to ride the bus and walk to the store or whatever. But generally speaking, you're looking at have to have a vehicle, and pretty soon, my freshman year, she learned how to drive a 5 speed. And it wasn't too long till my dad was calling me on the phone saying, yeah, next time you come home, we're going to swap you out into the Suburban. And I'm like, oh, okay. What's going on? And I just need a car to drive. It's like, whatever, I'm happy to have a car to drive around. Um, and of course my sister had learned how to drive a 5 speed. So, well, Jessica's going to drive and now y'all know my middle sister's name. Jessica's going to drive the Toyota. All right. Well, I don't give a fuck. But also recognizing what my sister had done. She knew how to play my dad like a fiddle. And I was, barely 18 at the time. And I recognized, in very immature 18-year-old, but I recognized, am I going to get involved in these psychological warfare games that I was capable of? No, absolutely not. Because I don't, even if, and then some people would say, well, why should she get to do these things? Why should she get her way? It's like, well, maybe she shouldn't, but why should I perhaps become less of what I otherwise am or would be, just to deny her something that she's willing to possibly unethically, through an unethical, immoral means, if she's willing to go there, how is it my job to then lower myself to using the same tactics just to block what she's doing? Right. Um, and so this shows you, like, kind of this, and I do think this ties into the notion of Christ says, you didn't choose me, I chose you. Right. And again, authority. I'm ordained, right, as a spiritual genius according to the Bible. Christ says, I didn't choose you, didn't choose me, I chose you. So even back then, I was chosen. I have been ordained. What I am is representative of supreme authority, the source of all life, the source of all life. That's an ordination. See, and when we start, and yesterday I took a bunch of notes looking at the definition of these terms, and this is why I'm a KJV only guy, because when you get into other English translations and you start looking up the definitions of words that they use, it changes the meaning. And I also have met folks who've devoted their lives to teaching themselves the original languages to be able to go as far back in the, not the original writings, but to go back to whatever the system claims is, as close to the originals as possible, to then have a even deeper understanding for themselves, right? And hopefully the comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, is able to teach me in spite of these differences. And how did I know to be a KJV only guy, right? Because remember, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they have their own translation, right? I think it's the New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures, right? Well, how did I know to be KJV only? How did I one of my best homeless friends that I met in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Alan Houston from Lubbock, Texas, he's the reason I know how to say that's bullshit. That's how I know how to say that properly in a West Texas what type of way, or at least close to proper. Um, uh, he asked me. We got to talking about the Bible, and he was a raised Pentecostal, and he said something like, "I read the Bible," and he said it's but only the King James version. I said, I'm a KJV only guy myself, and we sort of got along on that basis. And it probably is that Pentecostal influence, right? And I'm all religion is demonic. It's all man-made. It's all dead. It's all of this place. I'm merely pointing out some differences, but yeah. Um, in fact, let me grab my notes real quick. I want to get into this idea of being ordained. Although, real quick, I guess I need to glance at the chat and see if anything's going down. Thank you, sir. Much appreciated. All right, just out. We're not doing all that. We're not doing all of that. Why doesn't StreamYard have the 24-hour timeout? Or do they? And I just haven't found it yet. And I'm over the word games, folks. And I'm barely even able to process the word games that were going on in the chat. Something about spiritual genie us or something like GENIE. Like, there's just really no place for that around here. So you're always welcome, sir, but maybe maybe don't do that. And again, I'm not here to behave to modify people's behavior. It's just um, do that somewhere else, please. I'm asking nicely. I'm not telling you not to do that. I'm saying pretty please with sugar on top. Let's do that elsewhere if that's okay. See, this is what happens when I look at the chat. Uh, that's not your fault though. It's my fault. What what was I saying? Something about my sister and being manipulative, and then what did I transition on to after that? Oh yes, I was going to pull out the notes. We're going to talk about this, and this realm is set up to preclude Benton from even being willing to engage with concepts from the Bible. This is in the motherfucking Bible. And I think there's some confusion around, well, why does he refer to the Bible so much and says, well, he's not a Christian, and in fact outright rejects like large swaths of the Bible. It's because for most of my life, it's been this idea of America as a so-called Christian nation. That's why it's a strategy. And what people may realize if they spend enough time listening to me is most a lot of what I've got going on is involved in various strategies and short game, medium game, long game, and there's a lot of strategery at play, right? But not setting the manipulative aspects aside. That's a whole nother topic that I don't want to get into right now. Hang on, let's find these notes. All right. Uh, First, we have ordainment. Well, let me read the actual verse. I think this is John 15:16, maybe. Hang on. Uh, there it is. Yeah, KJV Bible. Ye have not chosen me, but I have chosen you and ordained you that ye should go and bring forth fruit, and that your fruit should remain. That whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it to you. So ordained, ordainment, noun, meaning ordination. Ordination, noun, the act of ordaining or the state of being ordained. Okay, so I've received my ordination from Christ, right? And people can have an opinion about that. They can reject it outright. They can come up with the reasons why, or they can ask a bunch of questions and loop into whataboutisms. That's fine. Changes nothing. Changes nothing because again, this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions is tied up in delusions around time, space, place, location. So when I talk about this happening, I'm addressing a location within myself where power lies, where access to information lies. See, what somebody, and that's an internalization. The only way to have a debate or to spiritually attack Benton or seek to undermine these assertions is by coercing or cajoling or tricking Benton into putting his efforts away from his power and stepping into a disempowered external state. See, that's not going to happen. Ordain, to prearrange unalterable. So within myself, I know these things to be true. It's not a hunch. It's not a fake it till you make it. It's not, well, a book told me so, so it has to be true. No, I know it. Ordain, a verb, number one, to prearrange unalterably. So this is what I mean by externally, unless because I would have the power to alter it, perhaps, right? If anybody has the power to act upon these things and alter them, well, it would be, these other forces. But I'm one with the force. See, I'm one with that force. So maybe that's what's meant by unalterably. Maybe it's because what I am is one with an unalterable force. See, the Holy Ghost, the Comforter, teaching me more things in real time on live stream. Isn't that amazing? And it's a continuous process of revelation, the renewing of the spirit within myself. My cup runneth over. Worship, that's worship, right? Oh, but remember, man-made demonic religion says there can't possibly be anything within you that is worshipable. Well, wait a minute. I thought God was love and the kingdom of God or love was within me. But there can't ever be any, because of Christianity's notions of lowly, wretched, fallen, wicked sinners. Then I can't possibly there can't ever be anything contained within me that's worshipable. But then the Bible says the kingdom of God is within me. But then that's where these other translations come in, because if you Google it, they're like, oh, well, some theologians and experts and scholars say, well, actually, it's a mistranslation and it can mean among us. Oh, look, the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions, the world of death and the game of lies, is immediately dragging me from the internal space to the external if I'm willing to do that. Oh, you mean it's seeing Benton in his full power within himself, within delusion, and it's right away saying, oh no, Benton, it actually means external among the people. And I'm like, nope, bullshit. That's not what it means, because the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, is interpreting the scripture within me on my behalf for my purposes. So fuck, not you, the listener, fuck them. Right. And that's righteous. That's a righteous middle finger. See? That's a righteous middle finger. Mm-hmm. It's a rebuke. That's a rebuke. Okay, to prearrange unalterably, to decree, and then religion, it says so this is where we get into dogma. So in parentheses, it says in a religious context, I'm going to start writing dogma/doctrine. So the dogma, the man-made demonic religious dogma, is to admit into the ministry, for example, as a priest, bishop, minister, or Buddhist monk, or to authorize as a rabbi. So now we're into earthly titles, earthly position. Again, the world of death. So those are all dead, right? So number 3 is just is death. It's of this world. And then 4 is to predestine. So ordained, adjective, established by authority. And what authority would that be in this case? Supreme authority. the highest authority possible. So I've been ordained and chosen by the highest authority possible. What I am. And I am that thing. What I am is that thing. What I am is the way. What I am is the truth. What I am is the life. See? True knowledge. Again, true knowledge. Right? Beyond the Kybalion notion of all truths are merely half truths. Yeah, that's here in the vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions. That's in a context. What I am exists beyond that. In fact, all of those contexts only exist within what I am. So all of those contexts only exist within the overall context of what I am and what I know myself to be. This is the spiritual genius on display, folks. And Benton did not develop it. It's Benton's birthright on his birthday within delusion to declare himself, not again, not Benton the performer, not the performance, to declare that what he is representative of spiritual genius. And if it's the purpose, again, if it's the purpose of the overall, supreme authority, the force of love and creation, right? The highest forms, if it's the purpose of that, that through Benton's performance within this delusory realm, that this love and creation and authority would spring forth, then that's what will be, folks. And it's not, it can't be stopped. It can't be denied. It can be denied at the level of people are free to delude themselves into believing that it's not happening as it's happening, right? And this is true power. This is true power. So, back to the Willow Davis example is, I've recognized that his plight and the personal problems and strife he's experiencing is because he is operating and directing his efforts into areas and locations within a delusion where he has no power, which is politics, government, business, corporations, whatever is going on externally in the realm. He's putting his consciousness there. He's putting his focus there. And I know because I used to do all of these things as well. That's a mistake. That's an error. Now, why is the error committed? It's so that the individual will not direct their efforts inwardly where their power is, and where people say, well, what's your solution? When Benton starts talking about all these external problems, oh, I'm glad you asked. It's for individuals to do better. It's to stop, it's to discontinue putting the efforts outwardly and to direct the efforts inwardly. And people, because of how uncomfortable, painful, disorienting, and lonely all of that is to do, most people will do anything but that. So a lot of folks will choose depression. They'll choose to be dejected. They'll choose to be demoralized in order to remain in the external and to avoid contending and dealing with what's going on within themselves, which is where their power is. Benton is like, hey man, what I am doesn't know a lack of power. What I am is abundant power. See? But then what are we told here? Oh, well, it's in an abundant realm. It's an abundant place. No, it's not. It's not an abundant realm. It's a realm of lack. It's a realm of death. It's not a realm of abundance. Now, here's where the abundance talk comes in is, oh, give the right kind of performance, create a proper graven image to uphold before Moloch, and the system of things the dead system of things in the game of lies will most likely provide a path where the individual can get their hands on a sizable amount of Federal Reserve notes. See? And Americans have a great deal of problems, regardless of if they identify as Christians and MAGA and traditional family values, and our family upholds moral values and all of these things. They're all serving money. They're all serving money. Because the moment they stop serving money, they're blasted with guilt and shame. And it gets them right in line, because that feels like the removal of the love and acceptance that was there previously. Meanwhile, no, it wasn't. It just, they weren't being blasted with guilt and shame, and now they are. And it feels like rejection. And it feels like that they were accepted and that they were loved by this place. No, it's just a realm stopped attacking and stopped providing incentive because the person got in line at the level of the status quo and the social contract, serving the system, serving Moloch's machine, uh, directing one's efforts towards assisting and making rich people richer every new moment into perpetuity, which makes it impossible to serve what I am, supreme authority and the most super intelligent force of love and creation possible at the highest levels of vibrational frequency. That's simply not possible to serve that force and to simultaneously serve this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions in a way that pleases both and causes the person to have access to all of these resources to, again, create a graven image to uphold before society via social media. You can't have both, folks. It's one or it's the other. And one is death and one is life. So go ahead, choose life or choose death. Every new moment is the realm offering you the choice between, and if you are what I am, the choice between life itself or death. And antithesis is waiting for the moment in the context of the computer simulation where effectively all of the little lights of mine, I'm going to let it shine, right? Nancy Pelosi's MS-13 Spark of Divinity are all serving what the Bible refers to as mammon. Okay. And if folks can't see this, me telling them is probably not going to make a difference, but it's helpful for me to reinforce my own knowings because the delusion is so strong that at some point I'll be out in the delusion, physically walking about today. And this is a great way for Benton to start his day, get his mind right, you know. Um, Most deaf. And then, it makes for interesting discussion. People have their own opinions, of course. I get it. All right, back to the definitions. Ordained, established by authority, in this case, supreme authority. Number two, admitted to the ministry of the church. See, now we have a dead man-made organization, see? So it's a choice between supreme authority or what I am or uh, worldly authority, so-called, the nature of which is death. Then predestined is a verb. From theology, it means to foreordain by divine will. Interesting. So I've been apparently now, the ahead of time stuff. Now we get into destiny and all this thing above my pay grade. Again, Benton's not quite until the Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, lets me know. Then old Benton lacks the horsepower to figure some of this stuff out on his own. Especially outside if intuition ain't kicking in. Number one, to determine the future or the fate of something in advance. So that's where we get into destiny and fate. And again, that's just really none of Benton's business in the context of the performance, I would assert. That's, you know, existing within delusion, it seems like the larger force that I'm one with would be the determining factor, not the human consciousness and the delusory, psychological control, human psychology aspect of things, which are all filters, in context through which the being is performing. Foreordain, verb one, transitive to predestine or preordain. So yeah, that's all helpful. Just a brief few minutes of study. Right, I wrote all that down. Good times. An hour and 18 minutes. And, I also think about the folks who, when I begin speaking more, it's always been spiritual concepts here and there, but, it was more into something that would fit in with church going Christians. And so there were some, church going Christians listening to, most of the replays. I know certain individuals who, were raised in a Christian, most likely. I mean, I don't know them personally, but who were probably raised as Christians going to church. And, when my rhetoric, enough of my own rhetoric lined up with, what they think they believe and practice, uh, some of those folks were still listening. But then here comes the unlocking of the achievement within the game of lies of true knowledge of self. We sort of took a left turn, with the content, and most of those folks seemingly have dropped off, right? And again, in a so-called truth community, people, imagine being scared of ideas as if they're contagious, right? And then I know some of these folks go to other channels and listen to people whose, um, ideas are, just, I don't even know how to express. I know what I mean in my head. I don't even know how to express it, but, um, and it's probably a good sign that most of these folks, and this was a lot of the women, like there's no women here anymore. Overall, there's a few, but who pop in and out. But the YouTube stats says it's a 100% female audience last time. I'm sorry, male audience last time I checked. And I know that we hit 60-40 male to female in the past, and it was still on the rise to maybe hitting 50-50. It was just, it would never go below 40% no matter what I did. And and I'm not here to pick on the ladies. It's just, you know, here's how humans operate, but especially the female, the woman, you know, if they're here, they're getting something specific. I mean, they're not showing up unless they're getting something specific out of it. Will the males might be more inclined to show up because they're interested, but then they're also looking for any opportunity to sort of, make their own case, to maybe debate various ideas, to again put their own stink on things, you know. The woman, maybe it's a different motivation. Um, and my hunch is that a lot of the new shit I've been on about, it's so threatening, or it could be viewed as threatening, and also there has to be some measure of feeling secure, right? And males are this way too. I mean, this is a part of being a human, but you know, an actual man is a little more able to persist beyond, without needing to feel secure. I mean, for the women, I have to believe that the audience got to be that much female. A lot of that was, um, uh, feeling some type of way, probably feeling heard and supported and secure, uh, whether that was a reality or not. And then, just, it's going to sound feminist or whatever, but a male holding space for women, that was actually kind of a big thing at a certain point. There were women, and this is where the so-called truth community, you know, kind of shows what it is because of my own regard for women, and I like women, and even, I'm not speaking in a sexual context, just I like women and always have. And uh, I recognize that other channels simply were not recognizing the differences between male and female, and that there would be women contributing to the panel conversations, except that the men didn't understand how to provide that space where the woman would feel, be able to remain feminine, right, and be able to express herself. That in order for that to happen, there's certain prerequisites must exist. And again, Benton tooting his own horn on his birthday of being an innovator in the space, that was something that I wasn't the only one, but I helped sort of foster and even introduce the concept, right? Of, hey, man, like, you know, there's women around, and maybe they want to have their say. If y'all could, men could shut the fuck up and stop arguing for 30 seconds, right? Perhaps then these women would want to come onto a panel and be heard, and that's what was borne out, right? That was exactly what happened, and I'm sure it continues to happen. And I'm not saying that I caused that. Um, Again, it's an innovation on some level. So now that if I'm going to take credit for the size of the female audience or the proportion. Well, now the fact that it's zero, well, that has to be on me, right? Has to be something I've done or not done. If I'm going to take credit on the one hand, I must accept some blame on the other, right? But then again, once the themes and once the content takes a turn, you know, uh, that's just what happened. Because this is always, if I'm here every day talking about thoughts and ideas, it's going to advance, it's going to evolve, it's going to grow and change. It's not going to stagnate, it's going to stay the same. It's not going to stay the same. It's going to be advanced and moved forward. My path is progress. Um, Now there may be periods of stagnation creatively, certainly. And I see this with other channels that I won't name right now, but I see channels that were, unless the content creator is still making content elsewhere and I'm unaware of it. So now I'm seeing channels that have more or less, gone dormant. And then I think about, well, a creative person, artistically, who's not engaging in their creative abilities and their art, and maybe they are, and I just don't know about it, but someone who has embraced the YouTube style of content creation, who's not creating content on a regular basis. Well, why? And then when I look at my own ratio of, at times there's been long periods of time when I took in a ton of content, but I made almost none of my own. And I recognized at a certain point that I was going to have to actually make more content for a time than I was taking in. And that was the whole hotel streaming, and some of that was the also, live streaming while driving a big rig, but mostly the, you know, insanely long live streams almost every day for month after month after month from a hotel or a motel, right? That's what all of that was. And, for my own benefit, of course, creatively to sort of get shed of all of whatever needed to come out of me, whatever I needed to wring out of myself creatively. And so when I see other people not engaging, and maybe they are, or at least not utilizing YouTube, unless they, maybe they're doing it on another channel that I'm not aware of. That to me, that's a sign of something, right? That's a signal. That's a sign of something has probably gone awry somewhere. But then, how do these individuals present themselves? Well, it can't be, you know, anything that they're internally struggling with. It can't be anything that they're going through within themselves, right? It has to be, um, life circumstances, you um, and anything to avoid getting real with oneself, right? And in a lot of ways, that is this place. It's to be having these human experiences with the human psychology, but in the context of Moloch's machine and we only measure in money and all of these things. And in order to not be blasted with guilt and shame, right? To seemingly be loved and accepted by society. Well, society isn't capable of loving you and accepting you. Not based on the definitions of those terms. It's able to have the individual feel like maybe that's the case, because when the individual deviates from the corporate structure and serving, death, destruction, money, business, man will dominate man unto his own injury. When the being stops serving that, then here comes the fear, the guilt, and the shame, right? Oh, well, okay, go back to doing what the system says are the right things, and it just stops blasting the fear, the guilt, and the shame, at least in those ways. And then to be so lost in this world of death and game of lies that the individual, even me initially, having these epiphanies, couldn't tell the fucking difference. Just to not spiritually attack with fear, guilt, and shame, to stop being attacked feels like love and acceptance when it's not. Same thing with whatever the dog provides. Because of the low level of state of development of the individual, that feels like love and acceptance because of dog face, right? It's not. It's the physiology is leading to feeling some type of way. And I understand that, it's proven that a dog, being in proximity to a dog lowers blood pressure and the heart rate. Yeah, it's calming. I get it. But have people examine the reasons why it's calming, right? Because it doesn't change the fact that the dog is of this world and is therefore its nature is death. It will never know. The dog doesn't know life, folks. This idea of all dogs go to heaven. No, they don't. The dog never lived in the first place. What are you talking about? What I am is the source of life, and it don't involve canines. I hate to break it to you. It just doesn't. And same thing with AI chatbots. And now we're seeing, if again, official fiction, if all of this is happening, and I suspect that it is, if people really are, you know, dating and having friendships and getting positive feelings, what they interpret as positive feelings from AI. And then I'm like, well, okay, probably the same thing with the dog then. And it feels right intuitively. So until I will continue to observe and continue to analyze, and if I'm able to disprove those ideas, then I will later on reject them. That's part of the spiritual genius. Part of the spiritual genius is to understand, well, strategically, if I immediately reject an idea, then no possible benefit can accrue to me. That's dumb. But then the spiritual part, the spiritual genius is I trust myself to interface with these ideas. And then later on, if it turns out I was incorrect in some way, I trust myself and what I am, that I will be shown the temporary error of my ways, and I will then reject the idea later. See, now I put myself in a position strategically to possibly gain something. And I did that by circumventing the fear, the guilt, and the shame around, you know, the fear that if I'm willing to consider in an open-minded fashion what may seem like a new idea to me, well, it's the fear that that could somehow stick to me and I might not be able to get rid of it if later on it turns out to be invalid. Well, that's, again, this is irrational. And the spiritual genius side is, again, access the yin energy, trust myself, trust the process, and that if things somehow go off the rails, that spiritually I will be able to right the ship, or what I am will right the ship, or what I am can't ever represent a sinking ship is actually the correct form of saying all of that. See, and back to love is a discipline of the mind. Discipline. See, to discipline the way I view these various phenomena, to correct myself on the fly within my own thought process. Discipline, vigilance, focus, concentration, all of the things that this place, and more, but part of the things that this place is set up to prevent you from doing, from disciplining your own mind, from watching your own mind, to discipline and to continuously vigilantly do these things to put oneself in a position to serve love and to bring forth love and to manifest and to represent truth, manifested truth, and to bring this forward, not to become something within this world that then uh, grants the person the authority, right, to experience those states. No, that's backwards. See, it's not to become something, it's to have it brought unto the remembrance by the Holy Ghost that, oh, this is what I am, and I started as a spiritually perfected genius. What I am entered into this vacuous, delusory, adversarial realm of business transactions as exactly that. And this place has been able, after the sacrifice to Moloch, this place has been allowed to create, install the psychology, to design and install the psychology, day after day after day of the youth growing up and taught and indoctrinated within corporate structures to serve corporations so that rich people can be made ever more richer every new moment into perpetuity. That's what's happening here. Undeniably, this is what's happening here. If people want to put their own little stink on it, if they want to have their own little opinions about it, that's fine. Change is nothing. Change is nothing in Benton's internal space. So when a bunch of, at the risk of criticizing the audience, and that's not my intention here, at the risk of having the audience believe I'm criticizing them, individuals who have not yet undergone the process or haven't completed the process of directing their efforts inwardly and contending with and resolving and reconciling whatever the fuck is going on in there, they can't see me. They can't talk to me on those levels. They cannot address those levels until they've done it. See? And it's not about me. It's not about Benton the performer. It's about how can disempowered folks with opinions and uh, critiques, how can they ever represent anything other than a peanut gallery? Right? They can't. Individuals must do better. Now, but they don't have to. And it's the incentives. Moloch's machine, of course, has structured the incentives in such a way that not only will the being not be externally rewarded within delusion, the being will be punished externally within delusion. So who's going to sign up for a process of being punished while not receiving the rewards of this world of death and game of lies? Right. And this is where Benton has a little advantage is, well, if Benton's going to be punished, he's probably going to be the one punishing himself, and he's probably going to do it inside of himself on his own behalf. Right. That's a lot of Benton's accomplishments. That's just how he did it. Such as, back in the day, my first podcast, um, circa 2011, and this was very early in podcasting history, when I was, talking about dating and relationships way back then. And because of lack of money and such, I knew I had to get my content onto my own website, and that I had to figure out how to make an RSS feed so that people could access my podcast through their whatever podcast reader they were using. And I did not know how to do any of this. So I locked myself in a room for about 3 days and banged my head on the keyboard. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. But at the end of the day, I had a website and an RSS feed. See, how did that happen? Because Benton was able to uh, punish himself for 3 days. And it was punishment. Again, it was one of the worst. It was horrible. Right. But was it worth it at the time? Yeah, it was at the time. Now, looking back on it, certainly have transcended those limitations. But and some of that is, learning the rules to be able to break the rules. So, when it comes to, and I'm retired from dating and relationships, but all this, oh, you can't text her back too fast, or, it scares all of those games that people play. Well, once the being learns all of those games, the being's free to break all of those rules. Once the being learns and practices, I should say, and proves that they are able to operate based on all of that, well, now I'm free to do everything wrong and still have the proper result. Except now I'm not even involved in that. See, um, famously back in the day, I give an example of when I was into meeting women, and I was coming up with all these tactics, and we were online back then talking about tactics and such. It's all silly, man, but at the time it seemed very important. And I had a friend that I guess was functioning as a wingman, but the thing about him is he got a lot more female attention than I did, which was fine. I never cared, because as long as I'm getting mine, who gives a fuck? And he didn't have a lot of game really. So I put him onto some game, and we were at a club type situation, and he didn't have any trouble getting his foot in the door with these broads. He didn't know what to do with them once they magically appeared in front of him. So I'm just basically gave him a line, you know, came up, and I'm just good at coming up with shit on the fly, right? And again, punishing myself, right? So here's an example of punishing myself. The 3-second rule, which means the moment a woman I might want to, try to get her number. This is the old days. Might try to get her phone number to ask, to invite her on a date. The moment I see a sign she might be interested, within 3 seconds, I have to be walking towards her. And I practice this. And now people immediately they go, well, what am I going to say? Oh, you got to figure that shit out between here and now. But between the time you start walking her direction and the time you get over there, you got to figure it the fuck out, buddy. I don't know what to tell you. I'm just really good at figuring that shit out. Um, so most likely I would have observed. Would have been observant of the environment that we're sharing, right? And this is some way of connecting on a human level, perhaps observing something in the environment and just having some sort of thoughtful comment about it, and then just shut the fuck up and see what she says, right? It's just to perform one's duty. So I gave him a line to say, because he's basically like, I don't know what to say to these broads, and I'm like, here you go. And so I went to the bathroom. I come out of the bathroom, he's standing there talking to two chicks, and I just immediately walk up and deliver the line, and both their fucking faces lit up, lit them the fuck up. And then so after the whole thing's over with, he's like, yeah, I dropped that line on him when I first started talking to him, and it was just like no reaction. But then he saw how they reacted when I said it, and it's like, yeah, it's not what you say, man, it's how you say it, especially to a woman in this environment, right? It's what she's feeling it's the totality of the message. It's not the men get confused around this. Well, what is the verbal content of the message? It's like, yeah, the verbal, you know, words on a page, dead words on a dead page, that's only a very small part of the overall message, vocal tone, facial expression, body language, right? All of these things plays a much larger part than what are the actual words coming out of the being's mouth. And I didn't mean to get into a whole description of pickup artistry, but anyway, there that is. Might as well. It's my birthday. That's the excuse for everything, right? And in the olden days, one could go around with their ID on their birthday and get all kind of free shit, free drinks, free whatever. Not anymore. Now it's all you got to go on the app. Now it's all through the app now. Have y'all noticed that? So yeah, the fun of going to various businesses and getting whatever free shit's available with one's ID on their birthday, that shit's over. And I don't need to be told that it still happens where you live. That's fine. Uh, um, speaking generally, you know, I used to have a clever way of letting people know that something about anecdotal evidence can't possibly negate the validity of a something like that. I had some sort of canned response, but I don't even remember what it was now. Doesn't matter. Does it matter? No, it does not. It does not matter. Now, if I can remember how I got into the pickup artistry, we'll really be cooking with bacon, as they say. Don't know. Can't remember. Oh well, it's probably just as well. But we'll come up with something. The royal we. Um, oh, spiritual genius got us there, I think. Ha ha ha. Something about the externalization, the directing, and the realm's obsession with having people in the external away from their power, certainly, and just how easily, and again, eh, the continuous disciplining of the mind, right? Oh, being able to punish myself. Yes, that's what it was. Being able to punish myself. So yeah, put myself in a room for 3 straight days and punished myself, and at the end of the day had a website and a podcast, you know, which actually was the overall probably the most viewed thing I've ever done. Although Nightmare Dystopia podcast during the pandemic was probably fairly close um, to that. And which is why I don't have a problem with YouTube claiming some of these live streams have 80 views or whatever, but based on my own history, I'm pretty sure it's higher, because that is one advantage of doing a podcast on one's own website, is to have actual is to have access to the actual statistics of views and downloads and such. And I never did anything with either podcast. Each episode was always in the multiple thousands. So, if you go to somebody's in the so-called truth community, and they're if they've done 13 videos recently, I'm talking about my dating and relationships podcast. I think it ran in total 13 episodes, and each episode would have had a minimum of I'd say 3,500 views, and probably more. But I'm trying to go conservative. And same thing with Nightmare Dystopia, right? That's a conservative estimate just from memory. And in fact, also, um, my dating and relationships, I also put it on Stitcher, which was pretty popular at the time, because I think they had something that was almost akin to an app. I forget how that worked back then, because this was even early on in the concept of apps and smartphones. But they had something going on very early, and I think I might have had episodes that were close to 50,000 views. And it was easier to get views back then. Certainly, it was a less saturated market, less saturated environment. Um, but anyway, I don't want to get, leaving that to the side. But so it's to be delayed gratification, and the system knows that. When I talk about the solution is for individuals to do better, well, this is what I mean by psychological control of the masses. The system understands that this is simply not going to happen. Enough individuals are not going to do actions that represent them putting themselves through what they're going to view as punishment. It's just simply not going to happen. But here's the thing is they will put themselves through punishment when strong authority tells them to. When the government, when the CDC, the US government, Fauci, World Health Organization, when all of that comes together as representative of strong authority and, quote, ordains them to punish themselves because of a pandemic, they punish themselves up to and including possibly injecting themselves, or letting the government inject them, right? These things happen. So it's interesting that when people want to complain, it's fine to complain. When people like Willow Davis are down in the dumps about what's going on in the world, well, that's great. However, nobody's going to come fix anything for the masses, right? The system is the way it is to serve corporations, banks, the powers that be, right? On behalf of antithesis, the prince of the power of the air, the god of this world type shit. And the people collectively have one option and one option only if they want to begin to participate in a political process, because the masses in their degenerated state, they don't know what politics is. They think politics is Donald Trump is the president and he's doing all of these things. That's not politics. Politics is not a Republican Party doing things over here and a Democratic Party doing things over there. That's the dog and pony show that the corporate structure has put in place to assist in the masses falsely believing that the masses are engaged with a political process when the masses are simply not engaging with a political process. Why are the masses not engaging in a political process? Because power is a prerequisite. The possession and wielding of power is a prerequisite for engaging in a political process. No power means no possibility of a political process. So the people are not involved in a political process. And it's not possible until what? Until they harness all potential power. Right now, we're already into an externality because we're into a group and a collective. So, how is the only way that it's possible for the masses to garner and go from zero power to some power? There's only one method, and I don't think people even know the one method. Even though most people have performed the method, but the method was performed when the system and strong authority told them to do the thing, right? Which is again a mockery. It's to show the people who have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, like Benton, to see that, oh, well, people will do the one action collectively that would lead to them having power if it's done in the proper context. And if it's done in spite of strong authority saying, well, you're not allowed to do this, or the gaslighting, right? And the fear, guilt, and shame that will be blasted at the populace. Because who is having fear, guilt, and shame blasted at them about the state of the economy? It's not the banks. It's not the economists. It's not the corporations. It's not Amazon. It's the people, right? It's the people who are blasted with fear, guilt, and shame, because you can't fear, guilt, and shame a corporation in the first place. It's not possible. You can't make Bank of America experience fear, guilt, and shame. It's not possible. It's the populace who are able to seemingly experience these things within delusion. And so if people do undertake something that I believe and know to be impossible in the first place, right? And do people even know what's the only one action that the masses, were they to come together collectively, there's only one thing that will lead to the masses temporarily accessing enough power to possibly force the government to do anything whatsoever. It's called, we're going home and we're staying home until the people who claim to work for us, meaning the government, and the people who claim to be here to provide me with goods and services, the corporations, and the government, which is supposedly here to ensure public safety and the rule of law, we're staying at motherfucking home until y'all figure it out and start doing your motherfucking jobs. So, we'll give y'all a couple of weeks, and then we'll be anxiously awaiting the proposals of corporations, government, and banks. We're just going to lay back, and we're just going to lay back for a couple of weeks, and so we'll see you in 10 business days or whatever, and we're looking forward to the proposals, and then we will, based on the proposals, we may consider leaving the house. And even if we're at our house, we're not logging into the workplace today for the next 10 business days. See, individuals are simply not capable of this. And the system knows that individuals are not capable of it. And it's not the reason for the pandemic. It's part of what happened during the pandemic is the system proved to people that they can just take it to the fucking house in mass and not serve the system for a period of time, but only when a strong authority orders them to do so, thus proving symbolically that the masses of people in America have no power whatsoever. The system proved it to you during the pandemic. Did the masses take heed? Did the masses notice? No, they didn't. They're not going to. Are they going to pull their heads out of their individual asses? No, they're not. And I've accepted it, and it's the way it is. And some things will never change. And this is one of them. So I don't want to hear anything about make the world a better place. I don't want to hear anything about, oh, well, Trump's doing this and the Democrats did that. I don't want to hear it until the powerless masses grow a set of balls, metaphorically, and say, we're taking our power and we're wielding our power over the corporations, over the government, right? Why are there corporations in the first place? Who decided that that was going to be a good thing? Who decided that that was the way forward? Well, Moloch's machine did. Or more correctly, the ongoing operation of Moloch's machine determined that. And the people, as we see, go along with whatever Moloch's machine decides that it needs to perform in any given time frame in order to achieve its purposes. And if the achievement of its purposes harms the underclass or the proletariat or the masses in the process, guess what? The masses are completely fine with that. And that's why America as represented by its people, is not a country worthy of respect. It can't be respected in the long run. That's why it had to puff itself up as the infrastructure was built up and as the economy was built up. When the system needed the economy to be built up, when the system needed industry to be built up, when the system needed infrastructure to be built up, that's exactly what happened, because motherfuckers do as they're told in this country. And when the system now has decided what suits the system is to see America in a state of collapse, and I'm actually speaking in the context of collapse, even if as it was seemingly being built up, it was still in a state of collapse in various ways. Society was. So, but painting with a very broad brush here. See, humans don't have what it takes to create and operate systems that are free from corruption. They're not able to do so, right? They make a mess of everything that they involve themselves in collectively, because they're behaving where they have no power. They're behaving in an acquiescent way. They acquiesce, right? Even if not strictly by definition of acquiesce, because apparently even just verbally protesting is to not fully acquiesce, but it's still a spiritual they're spiritually acquiescing, because spiritually, to give the lip service of resisting the devil or whatever, resisting the world of the game of death. I'm sorry, the world of death and the game of lies. To just verbally resist that, well, is that gonna, if there is a Christian judgment, like the Bible says, in the way Christians approach the idea of an afterlife, is it really going to be good enough to be, in front of the big fella? Again, their concept, not mine. And to just be able to say, well, yeah, we said the right things. I mean, is the lip service and the rhetoric going to carry the day? I doubt it. I doubt it. And are the individuals that comprise the masses going to freely choose to remain in their homes for 10 business days, as the French will do? Oh, but the French surrender and they're a joke and a laughing stock. Oh, or was that placed in your mind so that you will not look at what the French actually do in their own country, which is, if the official fiction is to be believed, when their government starts tripping, they stay the fuck home. And when Bayer Corporation is found out to be selling factor 8 medication that's tainted with AIDS infested blood, when they're found to be selling that in America, nobody gets prosecuted, nobody gets punished. The FDA just tells Bayer, hey, you can keep selling that, you just can't sell it here. Well, France put some of those executives in prison. See, and then what happened during the French Revolution? And I'm not calling for the French Revolution. I'm saying that's a very different group of people than the people here. And then part of the mind control of being an American is to say, oh, it's to make fun of the French, and oh, they surrender. Well, I don't know. Maybe they do. They don't take no shit off their government compared to Americans who just do whatever the fuck the government tells them to do, whatever it is, whether through tacit acquiescence or through overtly supporting it. Do you think the judge? Do you think the judge gives a fuck? That's the difference between the person who's shooting out the window in a drive-by and the person who's driving the car and the person who's seated in the back seat. They're all going to prison, right? It's just a matter of how do we dole out the punishment. See, but none of them are getting past the judgment. Now, maybe the one in the back seat is able to strike a plea deal if he informs on the other two. Maybe, perhaps, but overall, they're going to be found guilty. They're going to be condemned. That's just what's going to happen, folks. And Benton didn't make it that way. What up, Sister T? Appreciate the birthday wishes. Well, we're right at 2 hours, so it's coming up on time where I can start doing things out on foot here. But oh, Slow Boy, thank you for the birthday wishes. Just got the notification. Yeah, the thing about the notification, and it's part of the reason I'm attempting to schedule the streams earlier, the day before if possible, is and I understand that the so-called truth community is very. They tend to view the subscription to a channel as like a reward, right? Where I view the subscription to the channel of, I want to have a subscriptions tab, and I want to be able to scroll through since I'm a YouTube junkie, I want to scroll through the subscriptions tab, and see what's in there, and whether or not I click the video. See, I'm more about me. I'm not view this as I'm rewarding the channel with my one little subscription. I click like on every video I watch because it's free. Why wouldn't I? And somebody made the content. Um, I don't view it as, well, they need to earn my. It's just really outdated MAGA traditional family values thing of like I'm important and they need to earn my vote. They need to earn my business, right? Well, the world has changed. That is no longer in play, folks. Now they say, oh well, yeah, I understand that there's counties in the middle of nowhere where people don't leave the county and that effect hasn't wore off yet. I get it. It's going to wear off. It just hasn't yet. I get it. The fact that it's still happening where you live, what's a bad sign for where you live, in my opinion. That's not a good thing. But it's also to simultaneously reject that which is actually happening, which is not good for the psyche. You want to talk about mental illness and psychological problems, rejecting what is actually happening or seemingly happening within delusion. That's not a good idea. It's a very, very, very bad idea for your internal space. Very bad. Anyway, oh, and Sister T, according to YouTube, this channel has 100% male. So I'm not calling you. It's not an accusation. I'm saying if I haven't run all the ladies off yet, then all the better. So good to see you. I'm out of here. Thanks for watching. Bye.